I think about my childhood and it's funny because now as an adult, I go back and I think about it now and it's like, I've always lived in two worlds. It's so natural to me to live in two different places and two spaces at the same time simultaneously that you don't even realize that that's what even occurred, because when you're a kid, you're just enjoying all of it. And we had a great community at the Indian Center. Like there was a lot of fellowship there. There was a lot of togetherness there, a lot of traditions, takes a village. So it didn't matter whose parent or whose grandparent or whose auntie was snatching you up at a time, if you weren't doing something right, or whose mom was sitting you down to tell a story. They were just natural. It's just something that occurred. It's hard being a Native kid. When you're a teenager and you're trying to figure it out in high school, so going to powwows, putting on your regalia, putting on your feathers, tying up your mocks, going out there dancing every weekend. It's like the greatest, most exhilarating thing to allow your spirit to be free and hear the drum and just be full of fellowship and culture, right? Yeah, it's always been hard. And they're like, oh, where are you coming from? And I'm like, oh, it's just a powwow. And you kind of blow it off to your non-Native friends, but it's everything to your Native families. That's where it started to become tricky. Always being able to walk in two different worlds at the same time. Like, how do we respect and honor our tradition and the seventh grandfather teachings that were taught? And how do we implement those every day in our life and then still be a cool kid in college or in high school or however that works? And I think that's a huge responsibility to lay on the feet of kids. I'm an urban Native, so I didn't grow up on my reservation. Chicago is one of 5 or 6 relocation cities. They sold Natives on reservations promises, right? That they couldn't keep. Being an urban Native means that we're just intertribal, right? So I think everything that I've ever done as a kid has always been with respect to everyone. So I was raised by my grandparents. I think, for me, I didn't know what that was like. I didn't know that those were grandparents, right? Until I guess you're kind of like in school and you're like, oh, your mom's so old. And all the moms were young, right? But I grew up in the Indian Center. Well, in high school, I tried to be the cool, smart kid. I was trying to live in too many worlds at once. Again, I got bullied a lot. I mean, a lot of people may or may not know that, and I don't talk about it too much. I was bullied a lot. It's hard being a Native kid. I have teenagers now, but for me, I think that's when I started to recognize it. And I know for them, that's when they really started to, it impacted them as well. I didn't handle it properly, right? I joined the gang because I was like, you know what? Nobody's going to bully me here. But, I sat there and let them beat me up for 10 minutes. And then they taught me how to fight, right? And then I just fought everyone. And that was my defense mechanism, right? Was that I just fought. And that was a big part of why I did so horribly in high school. It wasn't because I wasn't smarter. I wasn't dedicated to doing what I needed to do. Because again, I was a kid. I was a dumb, hormonal, dumb teenager. And it was one of the drill instructors that kind of pulled me to the side and he's like, look, I knew you're a recruiter. I've heard your story. He goes, you have a choice. You either want this or you don't want this. Because if you don't want this, I could just send you home and it's fine. You can get your little honorable discharge. You served your 30 days and go home. Just go home. Go do whatever it is that you think you want to do out there. Or I'm going to turn you into the best damn sailor that I can. My family literally had bets on me. Nobody thought I'd finish. They were like, how much you want to make a bet she gets kicked out of boot camp? But I'll never forget the conversation my grandfather had with me the day before I left the boot camp. And he told me, once you leave, you can't come back here. I was like, what do you mean? I'll be back. It's only like 12 weeks. I'll be back. He's like, no, you can't come back. And I said, well, why not? And of course, it's like, because this isn't for you. You can't come back here. He told me I couldn't come home. It was the only home I ever known. It was sad for me. And I was sitting outside, and it was January, so it's cold as all get out. And I'm sitting outside, smoking a cigarette, and my aunt comes outside. She says to me, "What's wrong with you?" And I was like, "Nothing. You told me I couldn't come back. I had to go and couldn't come home." She's like, "Well, you can come home to visit." And I was like, "Well, you told me." She goes, "No, he doesn't want you coming back. This isn't for you. You are not your mother's child, and you cannot come back here. You cannot continue to live in this dysfunction your whole life. He told you you can't come back because you're better than this." Now, as the drill instructor is telling me I have to make a choice, I thought about the words my grandfather told me. I couldn't come back home, so I knew I had to make it okay. And I get emotional because he's gone and he didn't get to see. And my teachers, my instructors were like, "Wait, what? You didn't graduate high school?" I was like, "Well, no, technically I graduated." So I explained it to them and they said, "Well, that's pretty awesome." It's like, "Well, can I go? Because I know it's a class day, in Chicago, and I was like, yeah, we're going to let you go half a day." And a week before I get there, my mom calls me. She goes, "So they want you to give a speech at graduation." I was like, "Excuse me, they want me to do what?" "Excuse me." She says, "Yeah, the high school wants you to give an honor speech at graduation." I wrote it, and the Title VII time, it was Ben Scott, Renee De La Cruz. They used to run Title VII. That's the Native American program through CPS. They reached out and they were like, "We want you to do the speech next week at powwow. Like, we need you to come back. There's a graduation powwow. You are going to be our honor high school speaker. We want you to do the commencement speech." Not only did I get to give that speech at that commencement, it was the very first time that I got to carry in flags because I was active duty. It was the first time my community looked at me and said, "Wow, there's a success story." And my grandfather is a man of very few words. So, it's like when he told me I couldn't come home. I knew he meant it, but I was like, well, wow. And when he got to watch that speech, again, a man of very few words, but even fewer with the hugs, I will tell you. He gave me a hug and he said, "You did it." He goes, "I win the bet." He said, "Because I never bet against you." It was in that moment that I was no longer that failure, oh, that ugly kid, that skinny kid, oh, that not native kid. It was in that moment that my community recognized, even the people that maybe never said it out loud, but they thought it, or their kids that used to bully me and talk about me behind their back, they saw it, because it's huge when you become and you serve as a Native. It's huge. So, I went to school, graduated. My first duty station was up in Bremerton, Washington. Talk about culture shock. Holy crap. They stuck me in the middle of a forest. I mean, I grew up around, concrete and skyscrapers. Now it's all grass, ocean, and tall trees. I didn't know what to do with myself. I was like, I'm an 18-year-old snot-nosed kid that lives in a city. I'm like, what am I going to do here? My first duty station was a labor and delivery unit. That's what I did. I helped deliver babies, and I worked in their NICU, and I worked in their OB special care unit. You're a corpsman. When you go to a naval hospital, you just fill the billet, right? This is where they need a person. That's where you're putting them. But what I didn't know when I got there is you always have like a sub, billet. Well, mine was Fleet Hospital 5. I didn't know what that meant. So I was like, okay. It's kind of like, yeah, if there's ever a disaster or something, they call up the Fleet Hospital and you go and I was like, oh, sure, okay, whatever. I'm 18, going to work every day, working 12s, working at night, loving my life, hanging out with cool babies in the NICU, learning delicate procedures. And you didn't realize it. Again, it's so dumb that when you're 18, you don't realize what it is. And as you look back, you're like, man, I was doing like minor surgical procedures at 18. I'm like, holy crap. So a few months later, after I get there, my LPO calls me and he says, so you've been called? I was like, called for what? What'd I do? He's like, yeah, you have to go to this, there was this huge thing. And he's like, oh, you've been called, you got to go. Again, I'm 18. I just got off a 12-hour shift. He's like, go change out of your scrubs. You got to be in uniform. I'm like, oh, tired. I want to go back to the dorm, right? Barracks. Okay. So I go, you show them your ID at the door, checking in. And we're sitting there. And before you know it, there's a big logo on the big screen. All of a sudden, it pops up Fleet Hospital 5. And I was like, what does that mean? Within 30 minutes, I realized that I was being deployed and I didn't know where and I didn't know when, but I knew I was being deployed. By hour 4, I figured, oh crap, he means like soon. And then by hour 8, I was like, crap, it's in like 2 weeks. I don't know what that means. So I don't know if most people are familiar. There was a huge coup in the 90s in Haiti, and there was mass murders, overthrowing presidents. They were blowing up bridges, killing their citizens. Refugees were a huge issue, and that's where we went. But that was a challenge, right? I was a kid, and I'd never seen anything like it. We got off the plane. There's these trucks and they're coming in, they're getting our supplies off, and our Humvees are coming off, and our 2-ton trucks are coming off, and everything's coming off, our supplies and our sea bags and everything, And then when you drive off the tarmac, first of all, there are Marines all over the place, loaded like it's a damn war zone. Post-presidential coup. It was literally a war zone. And then you drive off, and then all you see are cows in the road. You see livestock. You see malnourished kids. You see tragedy. And here I am coming off of this high of knowing that I can create my destiny. And I'm looking at some of these people around. I'm like, what destiny do they have to create for themselves? I'm watching it, right? But it didn't really hit me. So part of our mission was to be out there, was to provide humanitarian aid. It was hard. It was hard to watch. We're driving down the streets. Streets that aren't streets, right? And we go to these orphanages. A lot of them run by the nuns that, the Franciscan nuns from Mother Teresa. But on the way there, you see tin shacks. You see armed Haitians on top of decrepit buildings. I invested in Tic Tacs because all the kids think they need medicine to be better. So Tic Tacs became really, really cool. So I invested in Tic Tacs. My mom used to send me cases of them so I can give them out to the kids. So I would put them in the little pill bottles. Remember the little 35 millimeter, or if we had extra pill bottle, I just had all kinds of different ones. Look, I bring medicine. Oh, my tummy's so better. But then there were kids that never came back because they died, because they were already malnourished. There were kids we gave vaccines to, and we hoped something would be better. The HIV/AIDS rate was 90% back then. Almost every person was at least HIV positive or full-blown AIDS. There was violence, there was death, there were machetes, it was sad. There were a lot of moments. That happened there that I like to keep to myself, because everybody has a trauma story. And when mine happened, We were actually we would get like these like leave breaks, right, where we can go to the beach. And, you know, at that point we had met other people, you know, in the joint task force. And so I remember I was on leave. We were going to a restaurant. I wasn't on duty to hold the weapons. But even if we're going to the restaurant, you know, if there's 4 of you, 1 has to always be. If there's 6 of you, it's 2, and so on and so forth. And so there was a couple of us, and 2 people had their weapons. But that day they stopped our Humvee. And I wasn't sure that we were going to make it out. You know, I had an AK-47 pointed at my head. You know, we didn't call on radios. They just wanted to make sure that we were treating their kids. They wanted us to treat their kids. They knew that some of us that were there were medics, right? And we used to wear our crosses on our sleeves. And I don't know if they just recognized a couple of us or what that was, but yeah, I wasn't sure. I mean, I think that's what people don't realize when you're in the, you know, in the military, is that there's no other option. When you're the person that's in charge, at least for me, when you know that you're in charge of medicine, knowing that you can or cannot save somebody's life, even in some small part, no matter what that part is, that life is bigger than you. And I guess that's the part of being Native where I always knew that life is always bigger than you. You're bigger than what is happening to you in any one moment. That's what the military was for me. It was always bigger than me. My service was always going to be bigger than me. And I think that's why medicine. People ask me, well, why medicine? I think that's why medicine, right? Because it's bigger than you. What you do with it is bigger than who you are, right? It's bigger than fixing a bridge. It's bigger than, being a rifleman. It's bigger than, all the things, that we can be doing. The goal of medicine is to heal. The goal of medicine is to treat people with humanity, with life and respect. And I think growing up that way as a Native kid, and having that already there, I think, you don't realize how many of those things tie into the decisions that you make when you have that base, right? But I ended up going to San Diego, not shortly after that, maybe about in 98. San Diego is a whole nother ball game, right? Because you have the 32nd Street Shipyard, you've got the Naval Air Station in Coronado, you've got the Marine Corps, boot camp right down the street. You've got the Marine Corps Air Station in Miramar. It's like SoCal is military central. There are military bases everywhere, and in California, it's surrounding little cities, and it was new for me, right? I went from concrete and skyscrapers to pine trees and oceans to palm trees and freeways. I had met someone at that point, so personal life was going great. My career was going amazing. I was on Admiral's Color Guard. I was their patient service rep. I was junior sailor of the quarter. Like, I was literally living my best life. It was great weather. It was good work. I was in leadership. Again, doing stuff that nobody before me has ever done. Not in the Navy, but for me, right? My circle of people, nobody's ever done this, and I'm doing this, and I'm doing it, and I'm killing it. And I was very proud of myself. Every time an eval came, I was just more and more proud of myself, right? Trying to figure out, what can I do to make this better? Again, it was good until it wasn't good. And it's kind of why I left. That's another thing I don't really talk about much, but in certain circles I do. And I think for this project, I think it's important because hopefully when this video gets to where it's going and people really watch them, they understand that this is very real and it happens. San Diego was great until San Diego wasn't, because I was sexually assaulted on base, and it gets hard here. Nobody protected me. Not necessarily from the attack, that was going to be what it was, but for all the fallout after. I had a chief that, first of all, I work at that hospital. I know everyone in that hospital. They see me, they come to me, I'm their person. There's nothing worse than being in the emergency room, getting those kits done, and having people stare at you. And those are your colleagues. Those are your coworkers. Then the rumors start. By 6:30 a.m., everybody knew that I was in that emergency room and why I was there. I think because I was in a really good clinic and I had really good doctors that worked in my clinic. I had a really good chief petty officer there. I had really good colleagues there. They tried their best to protect me. Naval Medical Center San Diego is a little different because they don't have their CO of their hospital isn't just a captain, he's an admiral. That's why Admiral's color guard was always great. It got back to him. And it was a very hard time for me. So this other person also worked at the hospital. And then it just got bad. It got not just bad, it got very bad. And then arrangements were made, and I was left out to dry. There's a lot of details I really won't go into, but the long story short is they won. They won. And a white dominated organization, they won. And they won because I left. They won because there were more of them than me. They won because I said it wasn't okay. They won because they knew I had people that would protect me. And the minute I was away from my admiral or those that could protect me, they did their best to get rid of me. And that's what happened. So when people ask, why didn't you stay? I didn't have a choice. There was no choice. You either go, or we will continue to make your life living hell, and you won't make it out. And all I wanted to do was live. And I wanted to survive. And I was already in survival mode. So I got out, and I had a strong partner at the time. And I lived. I took that part and I put it in a box, and I lived. It shakes you. It shakes you to your core when someone takes everything. And I don't think people understand when they say, oh, I lost everything. No, you haven't. You don't know what losing everything is until you truly lose everything. Your sense of self, your identity, your worth, your body, your career, your job, your income, your home, your family. That's everything. Because of what happened, it has literally changed the course of my entire life. All of it. But I didn't let it beat me. It didn't let it beat me. But it held me down for a really long time. There was no VA help then for those things. They're like, absolutely not. Those things don't happen in our Navy. They don't happen in our military. You know, if you can go to counseling, you'll be all right. It's way more complex than that. And yeah, we have to do better. The reality is as a military, as a VA, we have to do better. When you go through something like that and you're alone and you're still a kid, I mean, I wasn't 18 anymore, but still a kid. You know, I'm away from home. And I knew I couldn't go back home. I knew I couldn't tell them what happened to me at home. Because the first thing they would say to me is, well, what did you do? Were you like your mom? What did you do? Are you sure that's what happened to you? And I didn't tell anybody at home. My kid saved my life. I don't think they know it, but I was still in a very bad place. I was emotionally in a very, very bad place. And I used to cry. I was depressed all the time and I used to cry, but they saved my life. Breastfeeding saved my life. Those kids saved my life because they kept me from taking my own life multiple times. So when I tell you the Navy doesn't handle things correctly, the VA doesn't do it right, they left me out there to sink or swim. And I was sinking and they weren't going to help. So I moved back here. So after my divorce, I got separated, moved back here 2006. There were board seats that were up this past 2020. And they said, you should absolutely sit on the board. You should come back and you should sit on the board. I said, absolutely not. I kind of fought it for probably a good few months here and there. And I called my mom and I talked to my mom about it. And I said, well, what do you think? And she said, if anybody can do it, you can do it. And I was like, well, that doesn't answer my question, Mom. Like, well, what do you think? Not can I do it? And she just said to me, if anyone can do it, you can do it. She says, so do it. She goes, you know who you are, be proud of who you are, be proud of your accomplishments, and go out there and help. And I ran and I was elected by a large majority of our community, and I felt proud in my seat. And yeah, and then here we are. So there were some leadership changes, and the board felt that I could do this, and so they voted me in to do this. So this is what I do now.
Please welcome Melodi Serna of the American Indian Center of Chicago.
We acknowledge that through the acts of settler colonialism, their relationship with this land was shattered. The original people were stolen from the land as they were forced to leave through lies, torture, violence, and genocide. This is the legacy of how the land for the city of Chicago was originally acquired. To acknowledge this brutal legacy is not enough. We must find ways to heal it and to move forward together as a community. To that end, we must first honor with so much love and gratitude the many ways in which Native people have worked endlessly while giving up so much of their bodies and spirits so that Chicago may exist and thrive today. We must acknowledge the courage and the resiliency that Native people possess, that is evidenced by the continued indelible contributions they impart on our city to this day, despite their horrific experiences with settler colonialism. Presently, Chicago is the home to over 65,000 natives who represent more than 140 different nations. We are your friends and neighbors, your classmates and coworkers. We live, love, and we hope and dream in this city. We continue to build community. Today, as we come together as community, committed to uplifting all of our relatives, I need you to move beyond land acknowledgements. Acknowledgements alone do not create equitable conditions in the lives of our minority and marginalized relatives, including our Native American, African American, other communities of color, and of course our LGBTQ+ and Two-Spirit relatives. Beginning immediately, we must intentionally create actionable steps to boldly dismantle settler colonialism here in Chicago. As a community, we must ready ourselves with the strength, wisdom, and courage to lead the next 7 generations.
So when you come in and you take over and you tell people and then you teach them about the Declaration of Independence and how great of a document it is, and it literally tells people that Black people are 3/5 of a man or that Native Americans are savages, we're not even considered human. Well, that's a problem. And the fact that we look at it now and we never address it. Nobody has ever said sorry. Never once. There's not a president on record that has ever said, I am sorry. We did wrong. There has never been a government official at the top of the top to say we did it wrong. There's a lot of microaggressions that continue to happen that are just not recognized for our students. So when they see disparaging Native imagery on the walls of their schools, their mascots, they're not mascots. My kids go to powwows. It's a joke to somebody else. It's not a joke to us. It's who we are. It's who we are in our spirit, in our core. So when we talk about disparaging things in education, it has a trickle-down effect. It has a huge effect on societal norms, on what that looks like. But it starts at education. Because if you don't educate everyone, how do you expect them to have empathy? You can't raise kids in schools and ask them for empathy for a culture they don't understand because it was never taught to them. For schools have been around for 50 years or 30 years and we're your mascot, shame on you. Shame on you. Shame on you. Because for 60 years, for 30 years, for 50 years, for however many years, we're not a mascot. We're human beings. How would you feel if somebody was doing that to your mom, to your cousin, to your grandma? They don't think it matters, but it matters to us. We literally have survived genocide and continue to live in a genocidal society that's literally happened due to colonization. We've been gentrified through cities. We've had to be relocated. They've taken our language, our religion, our culture, our children, our education, and now we're a mascot. Shame on you. Absolutely shame on you. We're looked at like, again, we're characters. Oh, who cares about that pipeline? Oh, so what, Braves? They get over it. Really? I have to get over it? I mean, I'm still living. Our families are still here. Our culture is still here. Our history is here. You can't keep erasing it and thinking that that's okay. Because the microaggression of using a brave, a princess, an Indian, a chief, an arrowhead, a tomahawk, whatever you want to take from our culture as a mascot, those are important historical things to us. They're culturally relevant for us. And so for us to be used as mascots, it's insanity to me. And I don't understand it. I'll never understand why we have to fight to ask for the same basic human decency that as natives we give to everyone. We're not savages. We're not mascots. We're human beings. And, you know, the Creator takes care of us. That's why we're still here. We are resilient. We are Native and we're resilient. So we're going to make it through. We were born time travelers. We have the distinct responsibility of living very fluidly. We come from a 7th generation culture, right? So we live in our past, we live in the future, and we live in our present. But how that works is as we live in our present, we have to remember the 7 generations before us because they laid the groundwork. They brought the traditions. They gave us the language. They tell us the stories. So we have to honor that by listening to those, being those, and living those. But then it's our responsibility to then pass that back on to the next 7 generations. So we are responsible for carrying on those things for 7 generations at a time. And I think what gives me hope is knowing that we are time travelers. What gives me hope is that we can continue to empower our youth, that we can tell them they can be urban natives, they can be reservation natives, they can just be native and live and be who they are, go to schools, be great, go to trade, go to the military, but they have a voice. That they have a voice and their voice needs to be heard. I think Indigenous youth always give me hope.
I think being a warrior means that we empower. You know, we don't just teach, we don't just scold, we don't just hold staffs, but teaching and empowering, giving it right back, so that we can create the next generation of warriors.
Cool.
I think that's a
Perfect.
great ending. Yeah.
Unless you have anything else you wanted to add.
No,